This is a podcast from Torvine Voluntary Alliance. Hello, I'm Patrick Downs. Welcome to Word from the Third, where we'll be taking a look at all the big stories and news from the third sector here in Torvine. Joined today on the Word from the Third podcast by Emily Sockett from Deal Me Out. Now, a bit of a trigger warning. Some of the discussions today could be around suicide and mental health problems. But first, Emily, hi. Can you tell us a little bit more about Deal Me Out and its mission?
Well, hello, Patrick. So glad you asked. So Deal Me Out is a not-for-profit organisation, and we are tasked by the Gambling Commission to deliver the National Education Programme on gambling harm in Wales. We were started in 2020 by a chap called Jordan Lee, who himself, he struggled with gambling-related harm. So we have some staff who also have personal experience of gambling harm, and they're either in recovery or have kind of been affected by gambling, perhaps through a partner or a parent. In the space of the 2 years since we started, we've actually grown to 10 employees, which just kind of goes to show this appetite for harm reduction in the space. And we've got some really exciting projects coming up, so it'll be great to talk to you about those. Really, our ultimate aim is just to equip people with knowledge and skills to identify gambling related harm and know what they can do to prevent and reduce it.
So you're talking today about gambling related harm. Now, can you explain what exactly that is and what it looks like?
Sure. So when we talk about gambling related harm, what we're really talking about is any kind of negative impact that's associated with gambling behavior. I think when people think of gambling, what they think of most is financial problems. So people think of debt. But although that is a significant harm in itself, gambling related harm can go so far beyond that, huge impacts on mental ill health, relationship breakdowns, problems at work and education, social withdrawal, which is both symptomatic of mental illness, but also can lead to mental illness. We do also, unfortunately, see self-harm and sadly, in some cases, suicide, which obviously that's a terrible effect on the person themselves, but you've also got that wider effect on people around that person, which kind of leads me on to talking about affected others. So when we talk about gambling-related harm, we also include those people who aren't gamblers themselves, but they're affected by the behavior of the gambler. So that might be children, parents, colleagues, family members, employees, staff, beyond, pretty much anyone who's coming into contact with that person. So they might also be affected by that gambler's behavior, whether that's the financial effects or perhaps the social withdrawal or, their mental illness having an effect on that relationship.
Why do you think educating people about gambling harm is so important for Deal Me Out?
Sure. So we quite often refer to kind of gambling addiction as the hidden addiction. It's something that I don't think has necessarily been spoken about as much as drug and alcohol related harms. We talk a lot with schools, and I'm sure you can remember when you were younger, you would be educated on the dangers of drugs and drug addiction and the negative effects of alcohol, but I know for a fact that when I was at school, I never had any education around gambling and its potential harmful effects. So really, we're just opening up that conversation and making sure that people are aware that it exists. gambling is so pervasive in our society now. If you think about watching a football match on TV, say on a Saturday afternoon, you might see gambling advertisement really nearly 6 times a minute or 700 times over the course of a 90-minute football match. And that's a study by the University of Glasgow. But, you're talking about the advertisements in between the games. You've got the sponsors of the clubs, and you think about it, lots of kids are watching that kind of thing, and it's kind of glamorized and seen as normal. So for us, it's just about getting that conversation out there.
Now, as Deal Me Out's head of education, can you tell us a little bit more about the education program at the company?
Sure. So we currently offer a 3-strand education program. We do workshops which are available to pretty much anyone who wants them, and they are free. So the 3 strands that we actually cover are gambling and esports. So we look at video gaming and those kind of microtransactions in video games. And we also have a workshop that's specifically around the links between gambling and mental illness and how we can kind of improve our mental health whilst perhaps gambling safely or reducing our gambling. Each one of our workshops is designed by a team of professional educators and individuals with lived experience of gambling addiction. So we really have that personal story behind it as well. But it also means that it is properly a natural complement to the health and wellbeing area of learning in the Welsh curriculum. So it's ideal for primary and secondary schools. Like I said, we offer not just to schools and universities, but we will go into the private sector, the third sector. We'll work with community groups in faith settings. We've been into prisons. So really, we will go anywhere. And like I said, it is free, and we'll pretty much flex our workshop to fit with your requirements. So if anyone's interested, we can work around whatever it is that you need in particular.
So talking about those workshops, if I was to come and watch one of them, what would I see?
Mm-hmm. Well, we really try to make our workshops as impactful as possible. This year, I've actually spent some time overhauling our offer to make sure it's really fresh and up to date and exciting for the new year in 2023. Depending on the age or the topics covered, we've got a variety of activities or information we can share. So if you were to come into a primary school, you might see us playing a giant board game where we explore the risks of online gambling. Or we might have some personal testimony from a lived experience facilitator who, might tell you about their own experiences with gambling related harm. And that's quite hard hitting and impactful. We do generally do our workshops in person, but if that's not possible, then we can also deliver them over Zoom. And that would just be kind of tweaking it to fit with the requirements of whatever people needed.
So the next question, I suppose, is in 2 parts. How do people generally respond to these workshops, and what kind of impact do you think the workshops have?
So it's always really surprising how many people say, oh, well, that's just like my dad, or, oh, I've already installed an app on my phone to prevent me from using gambling apps. And I think in particular, we often hear that children are engaged in gambling activities without necessarily being aware, well, first of all, that they are engaged in gambling activities. They don't necessarily see it like that, but also just not being aware of the risk associated. So what I'm talking about there is things like children buying loot boxes on video games. that is actually a type of gambling. And they might use their parents' bank details to do that. And the parents might be aware that they're doing it, but it is still a gambling behavior. So just making them aware of that, really. We've generally received some really great feedback from our workshop attendees. People always seem to comment on how engaging our facilitators are. And I really feel like that's testament to the hard work that they put in. And, everyone at the company is so passionate about what we do, and we want to make a change.
I think the loot box thing is something that people not really are aware of as much, are they, I suppose?
It's true. Yeah. I think what we try and explain is that behavior is similar to sort of like, but remember buying Pokemon cards?
Oh, yes.
Pokemon cards, that's actually gambling as well, because you don't know what you're going to get. And we're not saying that we don't want people to buy Pokemon cards. It's just making people aware of that, so that, someone who is compulsively perhaps spending lots and lots of money on things like loot boxes or Pokemon cards, for example, that could be sort of priming them in later life for more damaging gambling behaviors.
And I suppose you go further back with football stickers. If you're looking for the foil football sticker, I'm
100%, yeah.
I'm showing my age now, but that's the kind of thing of, you get addicted to try to find the elusive sticker, but you just don't.
Well, exactly, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's just about being aware that kind of, if that becomes something that's damaging financially or socially, then that's when the issues arise. I've heard of kids who would rather spend their lunch money on football stickers, for example, than buying themselves lunch, which isn't healthy. So
no, definitely
making them aware of that.
Yeah. So besides the educational workshops, what else does Deal Me Out do to reduce gambling-related harm? Yeah.
So I am the head of education, so I look after the education strand of what we do, but we also do sort of support. And there's 2 projects that are currently up and running that we've got going on. So our head of support and our head of external affairs is currently working on the Patchwork program, which is free support program for women. It's mainly based up in Manchester, who have been affected by gambling, either through addiction or as an affected other. So this one's really important because women are quite often underrepresented in the harm reduction space for gambling. I think people often think of gamblers as male, but women are also affected by gambling harm. So that's a 24-week program, and they do really wonderful virtual meets online and sometimes live meets. And it's really to support people who are experiencing gambling harm, and it's designed and facilitated by women who have that lived experience. So it's a really special program. We also have the DMO Connect program, which is for anyone who is in active recovery from gambling addiction. So it's designed to combine weekly online events and quarterly live meetups, where people who are engaged in the program can try out new hobbies, interests, meet other people, develop new skills, and kind of build their confidence and self-esteem. So, we're kind of rebuilding that part of their life to help them in their recovery from gambling addiction.
So for you, what would be the most enjoyable aspect of what you do with Deal Me Out?
I mean, I think for me, I'm an ex-teacher, so I do really enjoy working with young people. And I think seeing the impact our workshops have on their perceptions of gambling and kind of how it links to mental health is really rewarding. They're so receptive to our work, and that's really it's nice to see them engaging, particularly when we talk about online gambling or sports betting. There's so many kids who love football, and when you talk about football, sometimes gambling kind of goes hand in hand with that. So, it's really rewarding to see them kind of realizing the link. And obviously, like I said, the feedback we get's great. So I feel like we're making a difference no matter how small.
So if people are experiencing gambling-related harm right now, what can they do about it?
I think the key thing is that you shouldn't keep it to yourself. Gambling addiction and issues around gambling is sometimes linked to feelings of shame. And people don't want to admit to that they might have an issue. So it's really important that people share with a trusted individual. So for some people, they might be able to open up to a friend or family member. But if they feel like they can't, then there are plenty of gambling harm helplines out there. So you've got things like the National Gambling Helpline or Samaritans. I would also advise people, perhaps if they're having financial difficulties, to look at places like Step Change, who are a debt charity. There's also the Debt Advice Foundation, if people are struggling with financial difficulties. And I think probably the one that's easiest for people to do is just to find a community of individuals who will support you. And quite often that's online. There's lots and lots of people out there who are talking about their experiences. And if you're not ready to talk about it yet, then it might just help to listen to somebody else who's going through a similar thing. We do also have our programs like the Patchwork Program and DMO Connect, or just get on social media. Twitter's full of people who are willing to kind of talk about gambling related harm, and it might just make you feel a little less alone.
Some of the links there you were talking about, we will post with the description on this podcast as well. But if people want to find out more about Deal Me Out, or they want to book a workshop with you, what do they do?
So the best thing to do is to head to our website. We've got lots more information about our workshops there. So that's dealmeout.org. You can drop me personally an email. I'm available on emily.socket@dealmeout.org. And that's SOCKETT if you're looking to spell it. Or there's an inquiry form on our website. If you fill that in, it will be sent through to us and we can deal with that. But I must just say, if you need immediate help with gambling related harm, then probably don't use that resource. I would go through the National Gambling Helpline or Samaritans. We're more there as a kind of second line. But yeah, we'd be great to hear from people if they're interested. We cover all of Wales. I'm based down in Cardiff, so if you're down here, then I can come and deliver for you, or we've got facilitators up in North Wales as well. And it's worth saying that we can also deliver in the Welsh language should people require that.
Emily Socket from Deal Me Out, thanks for talking to us today on the Word from the Third podcast.
No worries, I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
And don't forget, if you want to contact TVA, Torvine Voluntary Alliance, for anything regarding the third sector here in Torvine, get in touch regarding funding, volunteering, any kind of support or governance. info@tvawales.org.uk. You can also find us on social media on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter @TVA Wales, or of course on the website. It's all there at tvawales.org.uk. This podcast is produced by TVA, Torvine Voluntary Alliance.